Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. Each of us here today has bills that we have introduced in the United States Senate that deal with the issue of capital formation for our job creators. And each of those bills has passed in the House of Representatives by overwhelming bipartisan votes. In fact, Senator Hutchison's bill only had 2 dissenting votes in the United States Senate. Senator Toomey's bill had 1 dissenting vote in the House, in the United States House. Senator Brown's bill was passed by 407 to 17, and I had a bill that passed in November by a vote of 411 to 13. So overwhelming bipartisan support for these bills that are designed to help our small businesses create capital. I was at a high-tech task force meeting yesterday, and one of the issues that was raised there by some of the businesses that were present, and one of the most important issue was a single issue was access to capital. And so we're trying to solve that issue, trying to help our small businesses get access to the capital that they need to create jobs. Our bills would do that. They are being blocked here by the leadership in the United States Senate. My bill is very straightforward. There are SEC registration exemption rules that make it more difficult for small businesses to access capital by limiting them to getting capital from those with whom they have pre-existing relationships. This would allow them, open that up, allow them to get access to capital nationwide from accredited investors. But each of us has pieces of legislation that we would like to see at least picked up and voted on in the United States Senate that we think would help address the fundamental issue, the paramount issue for most people around this country, and that is jobs, creating jobs for American workers and getting the economy growing again. Access to capital is absolutely essential to that objective. So we're calling on the leadership of the United States Senate to take these bills, pass them. Most of them are supported by the administration. In fact, my colleagues, all 3 of their bills are endorsed by the President of the United States, and yet we can't get them considered here in the United States Senate. So I'm going to let each of them talk about their bills, and we'd be happy to try and answer questions. First up, Senator Hutchison.
Well, thank you, John. It's true. We've got a bipartisan bill that has passed the House on the voice vote, and yet we can't get it brought up in the Senate. And it would create the capital that my small business people tell me every time I go to Texas, we need capital and the banks aren't lending. The community banks are 11% of the banking industry's assets in America, but they make 40% of the loans to business. 40% with 11% of the assets. So what my bill does is open our small community banks so that they can more easily raise capital by increasing their shareholders. In 1964, a law was passed that required SEC registration for a bank that has 500 shareholders and a lower capitalization. The capitalization has been raised since 1964 to 10 million, but the shareholder base of 500 has never been raised. So my bill raises it to 2,000. What this would do is open up the capital bases of our community banks, which are the ones that are making the loans, and allow them to form this capital base without going to the SEC. The community banks tell me that on average it would save $250,000 a year because of all of the legal requirements of filing with the SEC. If you put that on a national scale, that $250,000 would add to more than $80 million nationwide, which would open up the capital to be able to be lent to small business to $800 million. This is a chance for the Senate to do something meaningful. We do have bipartisan support, and the President has said he would sign a bill that would allow our small banks to creatively get more capital. This should be done, and we are calling on the Democratic leadership to let us bring up some of these bills that have shown, with Democratic support in the House, that they could be passed in the Senate and sent to the President.
Listen, first of all, thank you for coming and expressing an interest in this issue. One good deed begets another good deed, and so on and so forth. We've passed the Hire a Hero veterans. We did the 3% withholding. We've done the insider trading bill. When we're allowed to go forward and actually work on things in a thoughtful, methodical manner with open amendment process, they pass. overwhelmingly. These have passed, has been referenced by the House overwhelmingly. We should bring these up. The American people want to we should be reestablishing the trust with the American people, and one way to do that is to provide capital and start to create opportunities and a mechanism to create jobs. Just think of this. Have you ever wanted to actually start a small business and or actually invest in one? Well, Massachusetts, as you know, is an innovative state. We're a hotbed for new ideas. The Cambridge Innovation Center in Massachusetts is over 400 businesses in one building alone. And I want to give people an opportunity to invest in businesses like Facebook or Google or the Droid program that was developed at that Cambridge Innovation Center. It seems like a far-off idea, but if we work together in the Senate to pass what's called crowdfunding legislation, we could do just that. And here's the background. Believe it or not, you cannot right now invest in a small business without going through the SEC filings and regulations. It's illegal. And you can actually take, for example, up to $1,000 per person. You can take as little as $50 or $1 and invest up to $1 million in a new startup. And that would, in fact, allow those businesses to avoid some of the lengthy and expensive SEC regulations. They still have the local folks in the individual states, the Secretary of State's offices and the like, to have some type of control. This issue passed overwhelmingly in the House, and you know, it's funny, only the wealthy have been allowed up to this point to do this sort of thing, to invest in those types of startups. But this, like any other investment, there is risk involved. However, my proposal, there would be strong protections and oversights, I feel even stronger than in the House. And overall, crowdfunding would be a boost to the economy. And as you all know, with over 400 votes in the House, and this is part of the President's jobs agenda, you know, why can't we just take these simple things that everybody is asking that we do to provide that financing and capital so we can get that economic engine moving and use that as a way to continue to chip away at this financial emergency that we're in? So I'm hopeful, and I'm asking respectfully that the Majority Leader bring this and these other bills up so we can get them out and do the people's business. Thank you.
Yeah. Good morning. Thank you for being here. Let me tell you a little bit about the bill that I'm hoping we can advance very soon. It's called the Small Company Capital Formation Act. Its shorthand name is the Reg A bill. Reg A has been on the books for many, many years, and it's a provision in the Securities Regulation Code that allows small companies to issue small securities without being required to comply with the full range of very expensive SEC regulations. When it was started, actually, the ceiling on the size of an issuance that was permitted was only $100,000. And obviously, over time, inflation meant that that was not a very useful figure. It was raised to $5 million in 1992, and it hasn't been changed since. The fact is, $5 million is too small an issuance to be worthwhile for the companies that need to raise the capital. And when small and growing businesses have the opportunity to raise capital, you know what they do with it? They hire new workers. They expand their existing facilities. This is how they grow. This is how the economy grows. This is how we create jobs. So what this bill would do would simply lift the limit on the permissible size of an issuance from the current $5 million to $50 million. This has broad bipartisan support. Senator Tester and I introduced this bill. There are a number of Democratic co-sponsors on the Senate side. Identical legislation has passed the House by a 421-1 vote. The President's Job Council called on this very legislation, and the President himself included this very specific idea in his legislative agenda that he called a Startup America. It is widely supported by more outside groups than I could name, and I think, I know that there's unanimous support among Republican members of the Senate for this bill. I tried to hotline this bill, and there is some anonymous Democratic senator who objects, and it went no further. I introduced it as I filed as an amendment to the existing highway bill, but unfortunately Senator Reid has filled the tree and filed cloture, thereby blocking it. So I just hope that Senator Reid and the Democratic leadership will just change their mind on this. This has very, very broad, I mean really almost unanimous bipartisan support. The President wants to sign this bill into law. We want to do this so that our small and growing companies can access capital and hire more workers. It's time we get this done.
Thanks, Beth.